In the UK, where abortion is allowed, you may not be aware of how much religious attitudes towards abortion affect political and personal decisions. In America, on the other hand, many states still ban abortion for religious reasons. This means that women cannot get an abortion whether they are religious or not. While many Christians obviously agree with this idea, there are a lot of Christians who do not. Liberal Christians, such as the Church of England, sometimes argue for a more relativist approach to abortion. This means they think abortion should be allowed or not allowed depending on the particular situation. Abortion may be more acceptable to these Christians, particularly in cases where the mother or fetus are likely to suffer. This is because they believe that the most important thing is to love thy neighbour and to follow the golden rule, i.e. to treat others as you wish to be treated. Some would argue that aborting a fetus may be the most loving thing to do. In cases of rape, for instance, it might be more kind to the mother to allow her to have an abortion. Other people will obviously disagree, saying that the fetus shouldn't suffer as a result. However, some people might argue that the sanctity of life rule is broken in war where even Christians kill others. Why not break the rule to help a pregnant woman whose quality of life might be low if they were to have a child? Such Christians also sometimes argue that if the fetus is likely to be born with extreme disabilities or health problems, then the most loving thing to do may be to abort it. On the other hand, an evangelical Christian would argue that abortion is never acceptable. They are absolutist and pro-life. They believe in the sanctity of life, the idea that all life is sacred and a gift from God, and that murder is wrong, as written in the Ten Commandments. The idea then, as you remember from Genesis 1:27 or Genesis 1:26, is that God made mankind in his image, making every single person sacred according to this belief. Roman Catholics are also officially against abortion. This is because they believe that life begins at the moment of conception. That is when the sperm meets the egg. Alleluia. For Roman Catholics then, this point is where life begins. So abortion at any point is murder. This, they believe, is a person, and as it's a person, you cannot end the life without in some way breaking a commandment or law. The idea that life begins at conception, combined with biblical teachings about murder, such as in the Ten Commandments, are used against legalising abortion or arguing to make it illegal. They would argue that it is always better to adopt and that fetuses' rights are just as important to those of the mother. For your exam, you must be able to explain the different Christian attitudes to abortion. You may be asked to explain why abortion is controversial, i.e. why people argue about it, or why Christians disagree with each other or with the issue itself. You should mention the different concepts of quality and sanctity of life, as well as biblical teachings on murder and the golden rule. These are really easy to remember, so you should put them throughout your exam answer if possible. Muslims also believe that life is sacred and a gift from God. This is known as believing in the sanctity of life, just as it is in Christianity. Abortion is usually considered wrong because it is seen as taking away a life, and Muslims follow the teaching that whoever has killed a soul, it is as though he has murdered all of mankind, and that's found in the Quran 5:32, another easy one to remember. Many Muslims believe that a life begins once the soul has entered the fetus. This is known as ensoulment. At this point, then, the life is said to have begun, and it usually takes place at around 120 days. Other Muslims argue that life begins earlier, at about 40 days, although there is definitely disagreement. Some would argue that it's when the fetus begins to move. Muslims argue that abortion is usually wrong, particularly after 120 days, unless the mother's life is in danger. Where the mother's life is in danger, this is known as the doctrine of double effect, and it's also accepted by Roman Catholics, for instance. This is the idea that if you do something good, e.g. saving the mother, that has a bad side effect, e.g. aborting the fetus, then it is morally acceptable. There is a double effect, something good, something bad, but the positive effect rules out the negative effect, because when you acted, you were trying to achieve a positive effect. It's quite an extension idea, but it's useful to know if you're going for a higher grade. In this case, then, the mother is thought to be more important, as she has a full life with responsibilities, and the fetus would not be alive without her anyway. If you have an ectopic pregnancy, for instance, that means that the fetus starts growing in the fallopian tube. Here you could apply the doctrine of double effect. If you let it grow here, it would certainly kill both the fetus and the mother. If you abort it, as we've said before, the consequence may be negative in this area, but it's positive for the mother and therefore you should go ahead. Some liberal Muslims argue that if a fetus is suffering from a serious, untreatable defect, then before 120 days it can be aborted. Other Muslim scholars argue that abortion should be allowed if the mother has been raped, although some feel that the fetus should not suffer just because of the way it was conceived. Other reasons, such as not having enough money, are not thought generally to be good enough reasons for abortion, although there have been some teachings coming from Iran and the parliament there suggesting that it might be in some circumstances. In the Quran it says, "Kill not your offspring for fear of poverty. It is we who provide them." This suggests that it should be the community that helps mothers pay for offspring they can't afford. For your exam, you should be able to explain some specific Muslim attitudes towards abortion and why different Muslims feel this way about it. You may be asked to argue for and against these ideas in an evaluation question. For an evaluation question generally on abortion, you could use Muslim ideas, Christian ideas, or just arguments in general, e.g. feminist ones.